Welcome to another episode of Trading the Price. Today is July 23rd, 2017. In the first segment of this video, we're going to do a stock market recap, take a look at the indexes, and then take a look at the individual indexes and this respective ETF. Then on the second part of the video, we'll look at some of the stock, in particularly with Apple and some of the high cap tech stocks scheduled for earning next week. So let's get started. Looking at this chart on the screen here, we're basically looking at all these indexes, and we see that the Dow Jones Industrial, the S&P 500, the New York Stock Exchange Composite closed at a new all-time high on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we have the Russell 2000 and the NASDAQ Composite closed with a new all-time closing high. And then on Friday, the NASDAQ 100 closed with a new all-time closing high. The little bit of a worrisome is the Dow Jones Transportation. It did not participate on those new high closes. So let's take a look at the Dow Jones Transportation. As you can see on this chart here, it made a new high at 94.7276. Then it came back down and went below this pivot high here, this sort of a resistance turn support zone. So right now it's trying to hold. So we have to keep an eye on it to see could it hold this level, or would we be able to see a bounce coming back up and move back into a new high territory, while the Dow Jones could just kind of hover around here, sort of wait for the transportation to catch up again, just like here. Essentially it kind of consolidating here, waiting for the transportation to come back up and then get a confirmation again on the next new all-time high. Then we look at the S&P 500 and the VIX. You can see the VIX is still down below the 10 level, closed at 936 on Friday. But the other thing is, you can see that the advanced decline, New York Stock Exchange advanced decline is still trending upwards. So that indicating the breadth is still relatively strong, and we should see a continuation of the market to upside. Now let's take a look at the individual indexes. We start off with looking at the E-mini S&P 500 future. Going back to look at last week's scenario, we were saying that we're expecting it to, what the scenario is to pull back to this pivot high here, then pushes into this trend line and bump into a little bit of resistance and then pull back. Then it pushes through and into this particular zone here near this 78.6 and the 127. So somewhere around 24.78.75 and 24.80.75. And looking at the price action, it essentially did pretty much what we were expected, except that it did push much higher than the trend line that we were expecting. So right now it is kind of pulling back to the 618 on the near the 24.64. So what we're going to see is or expect to see next week is this scenario. We got two possible upside, right? One is continue to push up into the zone here, and then pull back after it break through that zone, test for a little bit of a support, and then proceed to the 2500, because the 2500, as we said before, is going to be one of those psychological level, the round number level that the market most likely targets. So that's what we're going to be paying attention to, that 2500 on the upside. The other upside scenario is that it could pull back, fill this little gap here, found some support, and then punch through again and go to the zone and work toward that 2500. Then on the downside is that it get rejected, come back into this, below this trend line, fill the gap, and break below this pivot high that it broke through, and come back and do a little test, found resistance, and then proceed working toward down the to the 2112.75 and 2402.75 along the way, filling this gap. So that's basically the ES. And if we look at the S&P 500 cash index, here's the S&P 500 cash index, similar type of scenario that we were looking for last week, such as the ES. So we're going to come and just skip to it and go to the what we expect for the coming week. Okay, so the scenario is we're going to watch for it to push up into the zone here between the 2485.16 and the 2481.32, then pull back and push toward that 2500. Okay, again, we're basically targeting that 2500, or it could pull back, fill this little gap, and then push through again, break out into a new high and toward that 2500. Then on the downside is that it get rejected, come back into that trend line, below the trend line, fill this gap, and break below this pivot high, and then come back and test that and found resistance and just kind of got rejected and continue downward and fill this gap and work its way back down to the 2415.70 or the 2408.59. And looking at the spider, the ETF, what the spider scenario was similar to the S&P 500 cash index and the E-mini future. So going look at the scenario for the coming week, here's what we are looking at. Coming up to 247.48, break above that, essentially break above this zone, the 247.62 and 247.48, come back and test this trend line for support and then break through and work toward the 250 level. Okay, that's equivalent to the 2500 for the SPX. Or it could pull back, fill this little gap here, come down to that 246 area, and then push through again into the 250. Then the downside scenario is that we get a pullback, break below this pivot high, and then come back, retest it, and then just continue to work itself down and filling this gap along the way near that around that 244 area, and back to the close to that 241.95 and 240.64. Here we look at NQ, the E-mini for the NASDAQ 100. And looking at the NQ, the previous scenario that we're watching was for this thing to push up into new high and then pull back, then continue to push through and get up to the 6,000 level. So we're basically looking at that 6,000 round number psychological level for the NQ. Okay, and then here's the essentially that's what it did. It pushed into the new high, and now it's pulling back and just sitting above the this pivot high here. Okay, and the scenario that we'll be watching for the coming week is this. Let me zoom this in. So we're basically looking at continue to push up into the 6,000 level, and then we pull back, then move up, continue to move up, and here's these level to possibly 61.20.25. Right? The other scenario is that we get a little pullback, fill this little gap, then resume this upward move into the 6,000, and then pull back after hitting a 6,000, a little bit above 6,000 for retest, and then push into the 61.20 level. Right? Then on the downside, you can see that it could come back. Try to find support on this particular trend line here that it broke over here, and make it a little bit push back, try to get back above this pivot high, and got rejected, then it come back in, and then fill this gap down here, then it slowly work itself back down to the 55, 75, 50 area. Okay, that's the NQ. And here's the cash index for the NASDAQ 100. Again, it basically pushed through to a new high, and sitting above that new high right now, or near that new high. Well, it did close at a new closing high on Friday, but a little bit short of the all-time intraday high. So the scenario that we'll be watching is, again, it's going to be pushing through the 6,000 level. Okay, we want to see watching this to essentially push through the 6,000 level and then pull back for a little bit of a test, and then continue on and essentially working toward that upward trend line here on the channel. If we take a look here, we got this channel here that has basically been moving within, and that's basically what we're looking at to push through to this upper channel near the 6121. The other upside scenario is that we get a little pullback, fill this gap here and then push up to the zone, this 78.6, this 6,000 level, and then pull back a little bit and then proceed to the upper channel trend line near the 6121. Then on the downside is that we get rejected and come back below this pivot high, right? Fail to hold this trend line and then come back and try to reclaim it and fail and got rejected. Then work itself down and fill this gap and then come down and try to find support near the 55.6847 area. And looking at the QQQ, the ETF for the NASDAQ 100, we see that it is getting close to this upper trend line here. Just broke through above this pivot. And the scenario that we'll be watching for the coming week, again, similar to the cash and the futures, essentially we're looking for a push up to that 146 and then come back a little bit and push into that 149.32, close to that 150 level. We could also see it pull back a little bit, and fill this gap before it mixes another push up to that 146.43 and then into the 149.32. Now on the downside is that it get rejected and come back down, try to find support on this trend line and fail to find support and encounter resistance when they try to reclaim it, and it pushes down, fill this gap near that 140 level and then work itself back down to that 137.47 or 135.87. Now looking at the Russell 2000, the cash index, we were watching the scenario where it was going to come up. Let me line this chart back up. Okay, so we're looking for this thing to basically come up to this trend line and then pull back below this pivot high and then push above the trend line. So what it did is it came up to the trend line and pushed through it, and it's coming back, and essentially it came down and tested that pivot high. Okay, so right now we're essentially going to be watching for it to continue to push up. So here the scenario on the upside, continue to push up to that 114.55.72. Okay, this 100 measure move, the 100% measure move, basically is its trading band. Okay, then come back and retest this trend line for support, and then pushes through to that 1470.99. Okay, or the 1470. Okay, that's one scenario on the upside. The other one is that it could come back, dip below this pivot high, and come back and test the top of this particular trading band here, and then find support and then get another push back up to the 1455.72, come back and test that trend line for support again, and then pushes to the 1470. Then on the downside is essentially it just continue to pull back into this trading band and get rejected when they try to get back above it and counter resistance, and so it's continue to come back down to the lower portion of this band here, and it will try to hold support, and it fail, then it probably work its way back down to this lower channel. Remember, we were talking about this particular channel here. Let me there was a channel that we were looking at, right? This channel. So that's the downside, essentially on the downside scenario that we're basically looking at for that possibility to come back down if it's gonna pull back. Okay. And then looking at the the IWM, the ETF. Let's go and basically take a look at the scenario that we'll be watching for the coming week is to continue to push up to above that 145.70, pull back, and then resume its upward move to 147.20, or pull back a little bit to get back and test that 142.30 level, and then push above that 145.70, and then another push into that 147.20. The downside is that it pulled back below that 142.30, cannot reclaim it, and then work itself down to the 139, and then found resistance and unable to hold it, and work itself down to somewhere around this 134.64. So that's basically the IWM, and that's the look of the index. Now in this segment, we're going to take a look at Apple and also a few stocks that are scheduled for earning report this week. Those stocks are Google, that will be on Monday after the close, Facebook Wednesday after the close, Amazon, Intel, Twitter, Celgene. They are all reporting on Thursday after the close. So let's start with Apple. We see an Apple here. Remember we were talking about getting back up to this pivot low here. Once you get up to this pivot low, then we expect these high will be back in play. And you can see that it came back and reclaimed this pivot low. Even though it dipped below that on Friday, it actually closed above that pivot low. So right now, essentially, we are looking at the possible scenario for the coming week is to continue to push up, reclaim this this pivot high here, and maybe pull back a little bit after it break through that pivot low, and then push into the new high. Right, take out these previous high. The other scenario is that it could pull back, test this breakout point here, this 147.50, essentially like a W pattern here. Then pushes back up and take out this pivot low and come back, retest, and then push into the new high. Okay, those are the upside scenario. Then on the downside, we could be looking at this thing to pull back into this consolidation band and try to break through it and find resistance, and then break right back down, and possibly could also break this the low of this consolidation area and try to reclaim it, and if failed, then work itself down to this 137.44 or 136.57. Okay, let's take a look at Google. Google is, like I said earlier, is due to report on Monday after the close. And if we take a look at Google, we're talking about that breaking this trend line here. And once you break this trend line, we'll be looking forward to take out this pivot high. And if this pivot high is get taken out, then the new high or the previous all-time high will be back in play. So you can see that it indeed broke through the trend line and took out this pivot. It got above this pivot high. So right now it's kind of consolidating a little bit, pulling back a little bit, and we're looking for a push up to this trend line here. And here are the number that the market is projecting for the post-earning move. On the upside is 1037.69, and then on the downside is 950. So let's take a look at the scenario and see how the price might move for the coming week. So on Google, we expect it to continue to push into the new high. After we make a new high, then it pull back a little bit and then push toward the market projected move of 1037.69 on the upside. And on the downside is that it pulled back into below this trend line that it just broke recently, and come back and try to test and try to reclaim it, and it failed, encounter resistance, and then it work itself down toward the the 950, which is the projected downside move on post earning, and possibly get back to this retracement zone here between the 618 and the 50%, so somewhere around the 942 and 921 area. And here we're looking at Facebook. Facebook is scheduled to report earning after the close on Wednesday. And remember we had a trade on here, a long trade with the stop below these lows here, and the trigger would be above this these high. And essentially the objective is to see it come up to this trend line, and essentially could it be a maximum of 3 on return on this swing long trade. And as we can see that it actually exceeded our expectation, and it broke through these trend line, and right now is beyond the 3R. And right now, if it move up to this level here, 172.27, that would be a total of $6 return, and that would be the market projected price move on earning on the upside 172.27, and the downside is 156.59. Okay, so let's take a look at the scenario of how the price might play out. Okay, let me zoom this out a little bit. Okay, so on the upside is that it continued to push up, right, and then pull back a little bit prior to earning, and then it pushed into that 172.27 on post earning. Okay, or it could pull back below the trend line, right, back into this 3R level, and then pushes through this 200%, essentially this particular move here, this major move, 200%, get a little bit of support, and then pushes up, right, pushes up back to the 172.27 level. Then on the downside is that it get rejected, come back down, dip below this trend line here, and it tried to reclaim it and failed to do so. So unsuccessful. Then it come down, work itself down and fill this gap, and then try to get a little bounce and work itself toward this this lower trend line here. Then we have to see how well it could hold up near this 151.44 level. Okay, let's look at Amazon. Amazon is scheduled to release report earning on Thursday after the market close. Okay, Amazon here, remember we said that we're looking for Amazon to reclaim this trend line, get up above this pivot, then these highs back in play, then work toward these this particular upper trend line with new all-time high. And you can see the market is projecting a upward move of 1072.67. That's pretty close in confluence with the 1618 that we have here at 1077.85. So that's the upside move, and then on the downside move is 978.67. So let's take a look at the potential scenario. Okay, so here we have the upside is pushed through the above the trend line, come back and test that trend line for support, and then push into that projected move. Okay, on toward the 1072 level, or it could pull back, dip below this breakout point, and test for support, and then come through and break through again, do the trend line, come back and retest that trend line for support, and then pushes through into that 1072.67 level. Okay, those are the two upside scenario. And then on the downside is that it come up, bump up to this trend line, encounter resistance and get rejected, and then pushes back down toward this projected move on the downside, this 978.67. Then we get a little bit of a bounce back up to this 141 extension near the $1,000 level, and it get rejected and pushes through back down toward the 927. So that's the downside for Amazon. Now let's look at Intel. Intel been pretty much in a big trading band really for the last almost 9 months or so. Let me just kind of scroll back here. You can see that this is like a trading band, and if we take a look at the weekly, let's go on a monthly here. You see this 38.59 level. That's basically what we are watching for Intel to break. If it breaks, then it could work itself up to this 47, and it might come up to the the dot-com bubble high. Okay, so basically that's what we're looking at. This has been a lagger in the semiconductor group here. So basically watching this and see how it perform in this earning season here. Okay, right now it's essentially been kind of bounced off at the lower of level of the this particular trading band, this large trading band here, and getting a bounce here, fill this gap, and seems to be consolidating around here. So been consolidating here, and here's the projected move on earning. The upside is 36 and the downside is 33.45. So let's take a look at this scenario here, and the scenario that I got here is essentially a breakthrough, fill this gap, break above the gap, come back, retest it, and then move toward the 36 level. Okay, that's the upside, and then on the downside is that it get rejected after filling this gap and work itself back down, trying to find support near this this area here, and get a little bounce and unable to get back toward this gap level here, and work itself back down to the lower band to that 33.42, and that's basically in confluence to that 33.45 on the downside on the projected move. Then on Twitter is also scheduled to report earnings after the close on Thursday. Twitter been pretty strong recently, and you can see that it came up, got rejected up at that 1979, came back down, found support, and it's been kind of trending back up. And if we take a little bit further out look here, you see this pivot here, this 25.45. Right, that's basically this major move here, and this is basically, if you look at it, it is a inverted head and shoulder pattern. Right, if we take a look at this, and this is the baseline. So we got this inverted head and shoulder move, and if it could hold up above this this baseline here, then we could see this thing come back up to this pivot high here, somewhere around 25.45, which could get up and try to fill the next gap here. So let's take a look at the scenario. And let me zoom this out so we can see a little bit more. Okay, let me get this out a little bit more. So here's the scenario. All right, we can see it come back, pull back a little bit to this pivot high, find support, and then pushes up and break that one of the resistance level. Let me go back and show where that resistance level is. Okay, that's basically this gap entry level here. Okay, so somewhere around 21 area. Right. So that's basically what we're looking at, is to pull back, push up to that gap level, okay, and then get a little bit of a resistance and pull back, recheck, and then push up to that 22.13 into the projected earning move of 22.22 on the upside. The downside is 18, right? So if we take a look at the downside scenario, is that it get rejected from where it is right now, dip back, pull back under this pivot high, and try to reclaim it and fail to do so, then it work toward this 18, filling this gap here on the way down to the 18. So those are the scenario that we'll be watching for Twitter this week when it reports earning. Okay, finally, let's take a look at Celgene. Let's go back. You see Celgene here. Let's go to the monthly. See Celgene been nicely come up here. Look like a little bit of parabolic, but then it pulled back and consolidated, and now making another push and possibly make a push to a new all-time high. Okay, so essentially this 140.72 area. Right now, Celgene is scheduled to report earnings after the close on Thursday as well, and the market is projecting a move up to a 142.50 or a move down to 132.97. Okay, you can see that I have mapped out some of the level, and let's go and take a look at some of the possible scenarios. Okay, so what I got here, right, on the upside is continue to push up into the previous all-time high, and then can counter some resistance and pulls back a little bit, then do it into that projected high, projected move to the 142.50 on post earning. The other one on the upside is that it pull back, test this particular pivot high that it broke through recently, okay, retest that, and then get a bounce off of it and push through to the 142.50. Then the downside is that it's going to come down, get rejected, go back below this particular pivot high, unable to reclaim it, and continue to work itself down and dip below this 132.97, which is the projected downside move for Celgene on earning. Okay, so that's basically the stock for this week, and just kind of keep an eye on those earnings. It is earnings season, so good luck. And if you like this video, make sure to click on that like, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you for watching and have a profitable trading week.